Get them out before the cameras turn this into a story. Richard Holloway's voice cut through the ballroom just as Marcus Reed caught the tilting silver tray with one bleeding hand and pushed his shoulder between Evelyn and the falling glass. Red wine splashed across his old black suit. Noah stood by the service door clutching his father's coat, whispering, "Dad." Her badge fell. At Marcus's feet, the name tag read Evelyn, Banquet Service, its broken clasp showing a tiny mark, CH Executive Issue. 3 hours earlier, the Carter Grand Hotel still looked untouched by shame. The marble floors shone under warm chandeliers. The lobby smelled of lilies, polish, and expensive perfume, and men in black tuxedos crossed the room like they owned every inch of air inside it. Outside the side entrance, Marcus Reed eased a black town car to the curb, turned off the engine, and listened for the soft ticking sound it made after a long drive. He always listened. Engines told the truth if a man was patient enough. His vest was clean but old, the left cuff repaired with careful black thread. His dark blue tie straightened twice before he opened the door for the donor he had driven across town. "Stay close to the service entrance, Noah," he said without looking back. "Yes, sir." Noah slid out with his backpack and his father's folded coat hugged to his chest. At 10 years old, he knew gala nights meant waiting quietly, not asking for soda from strangers, and never stepping where grown folks were already pretending not to see you. Marcus gave him the small nod they used when words would have drawn attention. Then he walked around the car and opened the rear door. The donor barely looked at him. A woman in diamonds stepped over the curb, laughing into her phone. Behind the glass doors, camera flashes popped in small white bursts. Near the ballroom entrance, a woman in a server's jacket adjusted a tray of champagne flutes with both hands. She was calm, too calm for someone carrying drinks through a crowd that treated staff like furniture. Marcus noticed the way her eyes moved, not nervous, but measuring. She checked the ceiling camera, then the left exit, then Richard Holloway, who stood near the donor table with a smile polished enough to hide a knife. "Keep the service line moving," Richard told her, his voice low but sharp. "No mistakes tonight, Evelyn." Her fingers tightened under the tray. The name tag on her jacket caught the chandelier light. Evelyn Banquet Service. Marcus saw it because Noah had always been curious about names. "Dad," Noah whispered from near the door, "why does hers look older than everybody else's?" Marcus glanced once. The badge did look different. The edge was scuffed, and the pin sat crooked, like it had been opened too many times. Before he could think longer on it, the room shifted. A gray-haired donor in a velvet dinner jacket laughed too hard, stepped back without looking, and drove his elbow into Evelyn's side. The tray lurched. Glasses slid. For one frozen second, every rich person in the room watched disaster happen and moved away from it. Marcus moved toward it. He caught the tray before it flipped completely, but half the glasses shattered across the marble. Wine exploded against his sleeve and Evelyn's white shirt. A thin shard sliced the base of his thumb. Evelyn stared at him, breath trapped in her chest. Richard arrived before the sound of breaking glass had died. He did not ask who had bumped her. He did not look at the donor. He looked at Evelyn, then at Marcus, and smiled like a man saving a room from embarrassment. "Security," he said softly. "Remove them both." Marcus kept one hand on the tray and the other slightly raised, not in anger, but to keep the security guard from stepping onto broken glass. "She didn't drop it," he said. "Somebody made her fall." A few guests turned their faces away. The donor straightened his jacket and pretended to study the program card. Evelyn's eyes flicked to Marcus, then to the nearest camera, and something like fear passed over her face. Not fear of losing a serving job. Something deeper. She leaned close enough for only him to hear and whispered, "Don't say that too loudly." Marcus looked down as Noah bent to pick up the fallen badge by its edge. On the back of the name tag, beneath the cracked plastic, the tiny letters were stamped clean and cold. CH Executive Issue. The tiny letters on the back of the badge stayed in Marcus's mind even after Noah placed it carefully into Evelyn's shaking hand. CH Executive Issue. It meant nothing to him yet, but it did not belong on a server's badge. not with that kind of clean stamp under cracked plastic. Richard Holloway stepped between Marcus and the broken glass as if he were protecting the ballroom from contamination. "Sir, step back. She's bleeding. Our team will handle it." His voice was smooth, controlled, almost kind, and that made the insult land colder. The chandelier light slid across Richard's silver cufflinks as he lifted one hand toward security. "This area is restricted to authorized staff and invited guests. You are neither." A few people near the donor table looked Marcus up and down, not at his face first, but at the wine soaking into his old black suit, the repaired cuff, the driver's badge clipped at his belt. Someone whispered, "He's the chauffeur." Another voice, softer but crueler, said, "They always try to make a scene when money's in the room." Marcus heard it. Noah heard it too. The boy's fingers tightened around his father's folded coat until the fabric bunched under his chin. Marcus did not look back at him because if he did, the hurt in his son's eyes might pull something out of him he had spent years teaching himself to keep gentle. Instead, he lowered the tray onto the nearest service stand, turned his bleeding palm inward, and spoke quietly. "Check the camera over that table." The man in the velvet jacket stepped back into her. The donor in the velvet jacket gave a small laugh and adjusted his lapel. "Excuse me? I said check the camera." "Mr. Reed," Richard said, reading the name from the driver credential as if it tasted cheap. "This is a charity gala, not a street argument." The room did not erupt. It did something worse. It settled into polite silence, the kind rich rooms use when they have already chosen who will be believed. Evelyn stood beside the spilled wine with her shoulders rounded, her white server's shirt stained red across the ribs. The badge trembled in her hand. She did not pin it back on. She only looked at the ceiling camera, then at Richard, and Marcus saw her jaw tighten once. "Evelyn," Richard said, turning to her with a softer tone meant for witnesses. "You understand procedure. Accidents happen. We will document this internally." "The camera," Marcus began. Richard cut him off with a raised palm. "Sir, please don't make this harder for yourself." "Harder," Marcus said. "A woman got shoved, glass broke, and you're removing the two people who didn't cause it." Richard's smile did not move, but something behind his eyes sharpened. "Security footage in the VIP donor area is protected for privacy reasons. We don't display our guests like suspects." He leaned slightly toward one of the hotel security leads. "Turn that angle off until press clears the floor." The guard hesitated for half a second, then touched the radio at his shoulder. A tiny red light under the ceiling camera blinked again, and went dark. Evelyn's hand closed around her badge so tightly the cracked plastic pressed into her skin. Marcus saw that too. He also saw a folded slip of paper slide from her apron pocket and land near the leg of the donor table. Evelyn moved quickly, too quickly for someone only worried about keeping a job. She bent, covered it with her palm, and tucked it away before Richard's gaze returned. But Marcus had caught enough under the ballroom lights. Children's Recovery Fund, adjustment fee. The words were printed across the top, official-looking, with a dollar amount beneath that disappeared into her fist. "Evelyn," Richard said again, still gentle, still dangerous, "take 5 minutes. Clean yourself up. Then report to banquet storage. We'll decide your assignment after we speak with management." The phrase sounded harmless, but Evelyn went still. Marcus understood that kind of sentence. It was not a decision. It was a door being closed slowly so nobody heard the lock. "She needs first aid," he said. "We have staff for that." "Then call them." "Mr. Reed," Richard replied. "Your concern is appreciated but unnecessary." Noah took one step forward from the service door, small black sneakers stopping exactly at the edge of the ballroom carpet. "Dad," he said, not loud, just scared enough to cut through the polished air. "Your hand is bleeding on Mom's coat." Marcus looked down. A dark red drop had fallen onto the sleeve of the coat Noah held. The old coat Marcus kept because his wife had sewn the inside pocket herself. For the first time, the donor table quieted completely. Not from guilt, from discomfort. They could handle a chauffeur being dismissed. They could handle a server being blamed. But a child holding his dead mother's coat while his father bled made the room feel less clean. Marcus walked to Noah, took the coat gently, and folded the stained sleeve inward so his son would not keep staring at it. "It's all right," he said. "No, it isn't," Noah whispered. Marcus placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, not to silence him, but to steady him. "We don't let other people teach us who we are." Richard exhaled as if Marcus had made him sad. "This is exactly why I try to prevent scenes. Families get emotional. Stories get distorted." He turned toward a woman from the press table who had lifted her phone halfway. "Please, no recording. We're protecting the dignity of everyone involved." Evelyn looked at him then, really looked, not like a server afraid of her boss, but like a woman measuring how easily dignity could be used as a curtain. Marcus caught that look and felt the same cold question return. Why would a banquet worker study a cover-up like she expected one? Security stepped closer. Marcus did not resist. He picked up one broken flute from the carpet before Noah could step near it, set it on the tray, and said to Evelyn, "Don't let them make you apologize for someone else's elbow." Richard's phone buzzed against the marble-topped service station. He glanced down, angled the screen away, but Marcus saw the message reflected for 1 second in a silver champagne bucket. "Find the envelope before she leaves." The words in the champagne bucket vanished when Richard turned his phone face down, but Marcus had already seen enough. Find the envelope before she leaves. He did not know what envelope. He did not know who had sent the message. He only knew Evelyn's hand had gone to her apron pocket the moment Richard looked away, and that fear had moved across her face faster than any apology. Security guided Marcus toward the service corridor, not roughly, but with the kind of pressure that reminded him he was expected to obey. Noah walked close beside him, still holding the folded coat with the bloodstain hidden inside. Behind them, the ballroom noise returned in layers. Forks against china, low laughter, the soft swell of a string quartet trying to make broken glass sound like nothing had happened. At the corridor corner, Marcus stopped beside a narrow stainless steel cart stacked with clean napkins. He looked back. Evelyn was still standing near the spill, one hand wrapped around her badge, the other pressed against the cut on her palm. No one had brought the first aid kit. No one had even brought her a towel. Richard had already turned toward the donors again, his smile back in place, one hand resting lightly on the velvet-jacketed man's shoulder like a host comforting the victim. Marcus took one slow breath through his nose. The air smelled of bleach, wine, and hot food from the kitchen. "Dad," Noah whispered, "are we leaving?" Marcus looked at his son's face, at the worry sitting too old in his eyes. The rent was due Friday. His driving app had not pinged since Richard read his name out loud. A man with a child learned to calculate consequences fast. But Marcus also remembered another night, years ago, when his wife had been too sick to stand and a nurse had adjusted her blanket without being asked, as if small kindnesses were not small to people who had nothing left to hold. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the little emergency kit he kept from old habit. Gauze, antiseptic wipes, 2 bandages, a roll of medical tape flattened from months in the glove compartment. "Not yet," he said. "She's still bleeding." Noah nodded, not like a hero, just like a boy who trusted the map of his father's voice. Marcus walked back before security could decide whether to stop him. He did not step into the donor area. He did not raise his voice. He only picked up the cleanest napkin from the cart, moved to Evelyn's side, and held it out. "Press this here," he said quietly, pointing to the base of her thumb. "Not hard, just steady." Evelyn stared at him. "You should go." "I know. He'll make it worse for you." Marcus tore open an antiseptic wipe with his teeth because his left hand was still bleeding. "Then let him make it worse after your hand is wrapped." For the first time, Evelyn almost smiled, but it broke before it reached her mouth. She let him take her injured hand. Her skin was cold. A small triangle of glass sat near the crease of her palm, too shallow for panic, too deep to ignore. Marcus used the edge of the napkin to lift it free, dropped it onto the silver tray, then cleaned the cut with careful pressure. Evelyn flinched but did not pull away. Noah stood 3 steps behind them, watching the floor for glass the way his father had taught him. After a moment, he took the water bottle from his backpack and held it out with both hands. My dad says people should sit down when they're shaking. Evelyn looked at the bottle, then at Noah. Something in her face changed, not dramatically, not like a secret revealed, but like a locked room had heard a key turn somewhere far away. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was low. "What's your name?" "Noah. That's a good name. My mom picked it." Marcus's fingers paused for half a second on the medical tape. Then he finished wrapping Evelyn's hand. He did not explain the coat, or the blood on it, or the way grief could make a man fold fabric carefully because he could not fold time. He only placed the remaining bandage in Evelyn's palm. "Keep pressure on it for 10 minutes. Evelyn looked down at the bandage, then at the badge still in her other hand. A drop of Marcus's blood had marked the cracked plastic near the corner. She wiped it with her thumb, too gently for something disposable. The clasp was bent from the fall, and when Marcus took it to straighten the pin, the back plate shifted beneath his finger. A thin groove opened along the seam. Not much, just enough for him to see a dark sliver hidden inside, smaller than a fingernail. A memory card. Evelyn closed her hand over the badge at once. "Please," she said, and the word was not fear now. It was a request for silence. Marcus let go. He had lived long enough to know that some people carried evidence the way others carried wounds. "I didn't see anything," he said. Evelyn searched his face, trying to decide whether that sentence was kindness or danger. Before she could answer, Richard appeared at the edge of the corridor with 2 staff members behind him. His smile thinned when he saw the bandage, the water bottle, the way Evelyn was standing a little steadier. "Miss Carter," he said sharply. Then he stopped. The corridor seemed to inhale. Richard's jaw tightened, and he corrected himself with a soft laugh. "Evelyn, banquet storage, please. Now." Marcus did not move. Evelyn did, but only after slipping the badge back onto her shirt, crooked clasp and all. Richard's eyes flicked to Marcus's emergency kit, to Noah's water bottle, to the stained coat folded over the boy's arm. He saw ordinary things and dismissed them. That was his mistake. Because as Evelyn walked past Marcus, the badge brushed against his sleeve, and the hidden card inside clicked once against the cracked plastic like a tiny door closing on a secret Richard had not found. The click inside Evelyn's badge followed Marcus down the corridor like a sound too small to ignore. Richard had missed it because he had already decided ordinary things did not matter. A cracked name tag, a bleeding driver, a boy with a coat, a woman in a stained server's shirt. That was how people like him made mistakes. They looked at price and missed weight. Marcus guided Noah toward the service exit, keeping his injured hand low so his son would not keep staring at the blood. Behind them, Richard's voice floated through the corridor, calm and managerial. "Document that Mr. Reed re-entered a restricted area after removal. Add interference with staff operations." One of the security guards typed into a tablet without looking up. "Yes, sir." "And update his vendor status." Marcus stopped beside the loading dock door. The metal handle was cold under his fingers. "My vendor status?" Richard turned with the patient expression of a man explaining rules to someone he believed should simply accept them. "Your conduct created liability." "I wrapped a cut." "You interfered with procedure." Procedure was standing there watching her bleed. The hallway went quiet enough for Marcus to hear the low hum of the walk-in freezer behind the kitchen wall. Noah looked from one adult to the other, then lowered his eyes to the coat in his arms. Evelyn stood near the banquet storage door, her newly bandaged hand half hidden against her apron. She did not speak. Marcus understood why. Whatever she was carrying, Richard was watching her too closely. Richard tapped the tablet screen with one finger. "Mr. Reed, your contract has been terminated for unsafe conduct. You will receive notification through the driver portal. Carter Grand values professionalism from all vendors." Marcus's phone buzzed before Richard finished the sentence. The blue light washed over his palm. Contract canceled. Reason: unsafe conduct. Effective immediately. No warning. No review. Just a line of text small enough to erase a week's rent. Noah saw the screen before Marcus could tilt it away. "Dad," he whispered. "Did doing the right thing just cost us your job?" Marcus closed the phone slowly. He looked at his son, at the coat with the hidden bloodstain, at the boy trying not to cry because he knew money was not a thing children were supposed to worry about and worried anyway. Marcus placed his uninjured hand on Noah's shoulder. "Maybe," he said, "but doing wrong costs more." Evelyn looked up at that. Not with trust yet. Not fully. But something in her stopped moving. Richard gave a small sigh, polished and disappointed. "That is a noble line, Mr. Reed. Unfortunately, noble lines do not manage liability." He turned toward Evelyn. "Banquet storage. Wait there until I send someone." Evelyn nodded once, but when Richard looked away to speak into his radio, she moved her hand near the pocket of her apron. A tiny slip of paper, folded twice, slid between her fingers. She did not hand it to Marcus. She let it fall beside the brass kick plate near the service elevator, as if it had slipped by accident. Then she walked into banquet storage without looking back. Marcus saw it fall. He also saw Richard's eyes shift too late. "Security," Richard said. "Sharper now. Clear this corridor." Marcus bent, but not fast. He picked up Noah's backpack first, then the folded coat, then the slip of paper with the same calm motion, hiding it under his thumb against the coat lining. Richard stepped closer. "Did she give you something?" Marcus looked at him. "My son's zipper was stuck." Noah blinked, then looked down at his backpack. The zipper was not stuck, but he knew enough to say nothing. Richard studied Marcus's face for a long second. The mask stayed on, but the skin around his mouth tightened. "You are making a misunderstanding very difficult." "Then stop misunderstanding it on purpose," Marcus said. It was not loud. That made it heavier. A busboy pushing a cart of empty plates slowed near the kitchen doors. A security guard glanced toward the ceiling camera, the one above the service elevator. Richard noticed and stepped slightly to his left, placing himself between Marcus and the lens. The movement was small. Too small for anyone who was not paying attention. Marcus paid attention. He had spent years noticing loose belts, weak brakes, wrong engine sounds, and the tiny tremble in his wife's fingers before she admitted she was tired. People broke before they said they were broken. Lies did the same. Richard softened his voice again. "Mr. Reed, I am going to extend grace because your child is present. Walk away." Marcus did. Not because Richard told him to, but because Noah was present. He pushed open the service exit and let the night air touch his face. The alley behind Carter Grand smelled of rainwater, fryer grease, and exhaust. The city lights reflected in puddles along the curb. Noah stood close to him, still quiet, still holding too much in a small body. Marcus waited until the heavy door clicked shut behind them before he opened his palm. The folded slip was a hotel invoice, creased hard down the middle. At the top, in clean black print, were the words Holloway Events Consulting Donor Experience Package. Below that was an amount large enough to make Marcus read it twice. He did not understand Gala money, but he understood when a number looked dressed up to hide something. Near the bottom, another line caught his eye: Children's Recovery Fund, adjustment fee. The same phrase he had seen flash from Evelyn's apron. Noah leaned close, not touching the paper. "Dad," he said carefully, like he was afraid of making the paper worse. "That was already folded before she dropped it." Marcus looked at him. "You saw that." When she picked it up inside, it had the same bent corner. Marcus turned the invoice toward the light spilling from the loading dock lamp. The bent corner showed a faint smear of red. Not wine this time, but the tiny mark from Evelyn's injured thumb. A car door slammed somewhere near the valet stand. Inside his pocket, Marcus's phone buzzed again, but this time it was not the driver app. The message came from an unknown number. Service elevator. 8:15. He looked back through the narrow window in the service door just in time to see Evelyn step into an executive elevator using a black keycard no banquet server should have had. Marcus stood outside the service door with the black keycard image still burning in his mind. Evelyn had stepped into the executive elevator like someone who knew every floor above the ballroom. Yet she had stood under Richard's voice like a woman who could be dismissed with a nod. The invoice in Marcus's hand felt heavier than paper. Holloway Events Consulting. Donor Experience Package. Children's Recovery Fund. Adjustment fee. He folded it once along the same crease Evelyn had made and slipped it inside the inner pocket of his jacket, beside the old photo of his wife and Noah that had gone soft at the corners. "Dad?" Noah whispered, looking toward the alley mouth where valet lights blinked red and white through the rain mist. "Are we supposed to meet her?" Marcus checked the message again. Service elevator. 8:15. The screen showed 8:12. "We're supposed to be careful," he said. He guided Noah back through the service entrance, not into the ballroom, but along the side hallway where the carpet turned from deep blue to plain gray and the music became a muffled pulse behind the walls. The hotel smelled different back here. Less perfume. More steam, metal polish, coffee grounds, and floor cleaner. Workers moved fast with trays and linen bags, heads down, invisible until something went wrong. Marcus knew that kind of place. Every big room had a smaller room behind it where tired people carried the shine on their backs. They reached the service elevator just as the hallway lights flickered once. Not a blackout, a stutter. Then a low thump rolled through the wall from the ballroom, followed by a wave of confused voices. The giant screens above the stage had gone dark. Through the open crack of the service door, Marcus saw the Carter Grand logo disappear from the backdrop, leaving only black glass reflecting chandeliers and startled faces. A young technician in a headset stood near the control room door, pale under the emergency glow. Richard Holloway appeared beside him almost instantly, as if he had been waiting for the failure. "How did this happen?" Richard asked, his voice low enough to sound professional and loud enough to be heard. "I don't know, sir," the technician said. "The feed was stable 5 minutes ago." "You don't know?" Richard repeated, soft and deadly. "We have press, donors, board members, and a live pledge total waiting on that screen." The technician swallowed. "I checked the main line. Clearly not well enough." Marcus watched the young man's hands shake around the headset cord. The room's attention began shifting toward him the way it had shifted toward Evelyn. Slowly, hungrily, looking for a place to put blame. Marcus looked down at Noah. "Stay right here by the cart. Hands to yourself." Noah nodded and stood beside a stack of folded tablecloths, small but steady. Marcus stepped toward the control room doorway. "That hum isn't right," he said. Richard turned. The smile came back, thinner now. "Mr. Reed, I thought we had finished our conversation. The relay is cycling." The technician looked at Marcus, surprised. "You can hear that?" Marcus pointed. Not inside the room yet, just toward the metal rack where a faint clicking kept breaking the air in uneven beats. "That kind of click means the signal isn't gone. It's trying to connect and getting interrupted." Richard gave a quiet laugh meant to dismiss him kindly. "This is an audiovisual system, not a car engine." Marcus did not react to the insult. Wires don't care what room they're in. The technician looked from Richard to Marcus, desperate enough to listen. "Sir, should I check?" Richard held up one hand. "No one touches anything until the proper contractor arrives." Behind them, the ballroom grew louder. A microphone squealed, then died. Somewhere, a chair dragged across the floor and stopped halfway. The silence after it made the air feel tight. Evelyn appeared at the far end of the hall, back in the stained server's jacket, but her eyes were different now, focused. She saw Marcus at the control room door, saw Richard blocking him, and slowed. She said nothing. Marcus saw the badge on her chest, crooked, cracked, hiding whatever clicked inside it. Richard followed Marcus's gaze and shifted slightly, placing his body between Evelyn and the control room. "Mr. Reed," he said, "you have already lost one contract tonight. Please don't give me reason to involve hotel security again." Marcus looked at the young technician. "When did it drop?" "A minute after the pledge file loaded." "Anybody come in after you loaded it?" The technician opened his mouth, then glanced at Richard and closed it again. That pause changed the hallway. Evelyn's hand lowered slowly to her apron pocket. Richard's eyes sharpened. "We are not conducting an interrogation in a service corridor," he said. "We are following procedure." Marcus nodded once. "Then follow it. Check the service log." The technician turned to the tablet mounted near the door. His thumb trembled as he unlocked it. The screen showed a list of check-ins. 7:21, 7:33, 7:58. Marcus stared at the empty space between them. The paper roll from a small thermal printer beside the rack had jammed, leaving a thin strip hanging from the machine like a tongue. On it, half-faded in black ink, was one missing line. 7:42 p.m. User RH access granted. The technician saw it too. His breathing changed. Richard moved fast, but not fast enough. "That printer has been malfunctioning all week," he said. "It spits old data." Marcus did not touch the strip. He only angled the desk lamp with 2 fingers so the print became clearer under the yellow light. "Old data with tonight's time?" The technician's hand froze above the tablet. The hallway stopped moving. Even the kitchen noise seemed to pull back. Evelyn's eyes locked on the strip, and for the first time that night, Marcus saw fear and recognition arrive together. Richard's voice stayed smooth, but his cufflink tapped once against his watch. A tiny metallic betrayal. "This is exactly how rumors start. Partial printout. A stressed vendor. A young technician afraid for his job. Let me handle this privately before people misunderstand." Marcus turned to the technician. "Did you pull that wire?" The young man shook his head quickly. "No, sir." "Then don't apologize for sabotage you didn't do." The word sabotage landed hard. Richard's face did not change, but his shoulders went still. Evelyn took one step forward. Not enough to reveal herself. Enough to choose. "Keep that strip," she said quietly to the technician. Richard turned toward her. "Evelyn." She lowered her eyes at once, sliding back into the shape of a server, but Marcus heard the command behind her softness. The technician tore off the printed strip with shaking fingers and handed it toward Marcus instead of Richard. Marcus did not raise it like a trophy. He folded it carefully and tucked it behind the invoice in his jacket. Then he crouched by the rack, keeping both hands where the technician could see them. The signal cable was not broken. It had been loosened just enough to fail when the pledge file loaded. Marcus pushed it back until it clicked into place. The screens in the ballroom flashed white, then blue, then filled again with the Carter Grand logo and the glowing pledge total. A ripple moved through the guests. Someone began clapping, not knowing who had fixed it. Marcus stood, wiped his hand on a napkin, and stepped away before the applause could find the wrong person. Noah looked relieved for the first time all night, but he stayed by the cart like he had promised. Richard leaned close as Marcus passed. "You enjoy making yourself useful, don't you?" Marcus looked at him calmly. "Only when someone else is about to pay for what they didn't do." Evelyn watched that answer land. Her fingers touched the crooked badge at her chest. Then she turned slightly toward a woman in a black suit near the staff entrance and gave the smallest nod. The woman lifted her phone and walked away without a word. Marcus did not know who she was. He did not know that one quiet nod had just sent someone looking for the original camera file. All he knew was that his own phone buzzed in his pocket a few seconds later, from a hidden number again, and the message made the noise of the ballroom feel suddenly far away. "Leave now or your son loses more than your job." The message stayed on Marcus's phone like a hand around his throat. "Leave now or your son loses more than your job." For a moment, the hallway seemed to narrow until all Marcus could hear was the soft breathing of his son beside the linen cart and the faint clicking of the screen system cooling behind him. Noah was looking at him, waiting for the grown-up version of the world to make sense. Marcus turned the phone face down in his palm, not because he wanted to hide the threat from the truth, but because he refused to let fear become the first thing his son saw in him. Evelyn had seen it too. Her eyes went to the phone, then to Noah, then to Marcus's bleeding hand, and something in her face shifted from caution to decision. She stepped close enough that the scent of hotel soap and red wine clung to her stained server's jacket. "Kitchen cold room," she said under her breath. 2 minutes. Then she lowered her eyes again as Richard turned from the control room doorway. "Evelyn," he called, his voice still soft enough for witnesses and sharp enough for her. "A word." She stopped, but she did not go to him. "I'm needed in banquet storage." Richard smiled. "You are needed where management tells you you are needed." Marcus watched Evelyn's fingers touch the crooked badge at her chest. The cracked plastic caught a hard white strip of fluorescent light. Whatever was hidden inside it, she had not protected it this long to let Richard corner her now. Marcus looked at Noah. "You stay with Mr. Alvarez by the dish station." The young dishwasher, barely older than 20, had been pretending not to listen while loading. Racks of glasses. At the sound of his name, he looked up, startled. Marcus did not ask him to be brave. He only said, "Just let him stand where I can see him." Alvarez nodded once. That was enough. Marcus crossed toward the kitchen cold room without rushing, moving like a man who had spent his whole life learning that panic gave power to people who wanted you unsteady. Inside, the cold hit him first. Shelves of fruit trays, silver bowls, and boxed desserts lined the walls. The air smelled of cut lemons, metal, and buttercream. The hum of refrigeration covered the ballroom music until the whole gala sounded like something happening underwater. Evelyn was already there, standing beside a prep table under a buzzing light. On the table lay the folded invoice Marcus had carried, the torn service log strip, and the small gray slip he had seen earlier, Children's Recovery Fund, adjustment fee. She placed one more item beside them, taken from inside her apron with careful hands. A printed charity record, folded into quarters, worn soft at the seams from being opened too many times. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I'm not asking you to fight my battle." "Then what are you asking?" "To tell the truth only about what you saw." Marcus looked at the papers, not at her face. "That usually turns into fighting anyway." Evelyn's mouth tightened like she knew that too well. She unfolded the charity record. Lines of names appeared under neat columns. Child, guardian, application date, status, adjustment code. Some were marked incomplete. Some were marked withdrawn. Too many had the same code printed beside them. CRF 47A. Marcus did not know accounting, but he knew repetition. A mistake happened once. A system happened over and over. Evelyn slid a finger down the list. These were supposed to be emergency education grants for children whose families had medical debt, lost housing, or a surviving parent working under hardship. The money was raised in rooms like this. Her voice stayed level, but Marcus heard the weight under it. Then the files started changing. Documents marked missing. Guardians marked unreachable. Funds moved into donor hospitality and event. Logistics. Marcus looked at the invoice again. Holloway Events Consulting Donor Experience Package. Richard's company. Evelyn nodded once. A company he claims is only a vendor. Claims. I couldn't prove the pattern from the executive reports. They looked clean. Marcus touched the torn service log strip with one finger. 7:42 p.m. User RH access granted. But the back rooms weren't clean. Evelyn's eyes moved to his hand. No, the refrigeration unit clicked off, and the sudden quiet made the paper on the table feel louder than words. Marcus saw a name halfway down the charity record and went still. Read, Noah. Guardian verification missing. Application withdrawn. For a second, he was no longer inside the Carter Grand Hotel. He was back at a school office with a plastic chair digging into his back. A receptionist saying the fund never received his second form. Noah pretending to read a poster about college while listening to every word. Marcus remembered the folder he had carried that day, the blue one with frayed edges, the receipt stapled to the front, the one he had kept because his wife had taught him never to trust a system that could lose paper and blame the poor for not having copies. Slowly, he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, past the folded invoice, past the old photo, and pulled out a thin school receipt, creased but clean. He placed it on the table beside Noah's name. The date was clear. The signature was clear. The office stamp was clear. Evelyn stared at it. Her hand, the bandaged one Marcus had wrapped, lowered to the table and stopped before touching the receipt. She did not apologize right away. Marcus respected that. Some apologies came too fast because people wanted relief for themselves, not repair for the person harmed. He wasn't missing anything, Marcus said. I know. No, Marcus said, still quiet. You didn't know. Now you do. Evelyn looked at him then. The cold room light made her face look paler, sharper, stripped of the calm she had worn in the ballroom. Mr. Reed, don't fix my son first. The words came out before anger could harden them. He looked down at all the other names on the page. Fix what made him disappear on paper. Evelyn's breath caught. Outside the cold room, a cart rattled past, then faded. Inside, neither of them moved. It was the first time Marcus saw the woman under the disguise not as a server, not as a secret, but as someone carrying the knowledge that power had failed people she had promised to protect. She reached to the badge on her chest and pressed the cracked corner until the hidden card clicked faintly inside. There are copies on here, she said. Emails, audit notes, partial camera files. Not enough without the originals. Originals where? Security archive. Executive server. Richard controls the event access tonight, but he doesn't control the permanent backup unless someone in security gives it to him. Marcus glanced toward the door. Through the small square window, he could see Richard in the service corridor, speaking to 2 hotel security staff. His smile was gone now. Not completely, just enough to show the man underneath was sweating. He wiped one thumb along the edge of his phone, then looked toward the cold room window as if he could feel the papers gathering against him. Evelyn noticed. Her shoulders squared, but she still did not step out. If I reveal too soon, he'll say I staged this because I wanted a dramatic moment. If I wait too long, he buries the archive. Marcus picked up the service log strip and set it beside the charity record, aligning the time with the adjustment code, not because he was trained in law, but because truth looked different when pieces sat close enough to speak to each other. Then don't make it dramatic, he said. Make it exact. Evelyn stared at the table. The invoice, the log, the receipt, the charity record, the badge. A chain not finished, but strong enough to pull on. You could use this right now, she said. You could walk into that ballroom and tell everyone your son was cheated. Marcus looked toward the corridor where Noah stood with Alvarez, safe, small, watching his father through steam and moving staff. And then Richard calls me emotional, calls you a bitter server, calls the papers stolen, and those children stay numbers. He folded Noah's receipt once along its old crease. We don't swing before the nail is set. Evelyn gave a breath that was almost a laugh, except there was too much pain in it. Were you always this calm? Marcus looked at the wedding ring he still wore on his right hand now, not as marriage but memory. No, that was all he gave her. It was enough. The cold room door opened before either of them could speak again. Richard stood there with one hand on the handle. His face returned to its professional mask. Behind him, 2 security staff waited, and beyond them, the ballroom announcer's voice began calling guests back to their seats for the main pledge presentation. There you are, Richard said, eyes dropping to the papers on the prep table for one quick, hungry second. This is not an appropriate place for private conversations with vendors. Evelyn slid the charity record under her palm. Then we should have the conversation publicly. Richard blinked. Tiny thing. Almost nothing. But Marcus saw it. Richard recovered with a soft chuckle. Publicly? Evelyn, you're tired. You had an accident. He used her first name like a leash. Evelyn did not move. Marcus placed the school receipt on top of the stack, Noah's name facing upward. Richard saw it, and the color under his skin changed just slightly. Mr. Reed, he said, voice lower now. You are confused about documents you do not understand. Marcus met his eyes. Maybe, but I understand my son's name. The cold room went silent except for the returning hum of the refrigerator. Evelyn lifted the badge from her chest, held it in her bandaged hand, and for the first time Richard looked afraid of a piece of plastic. Then the announcer outside said into the ballroom microphone, "Ladies and gentlemen, Please welcome Mr. Richard Holloway for the Children's Recovery Fund Pledge Report. And Marcus knew the truth had become too heavy to be handled behind a closed door. The ballroom looked brighter than it had before, and that made everything feel more dangerous. The broken glass was gone, the red wine had been scrubbed from the marble, the silver trays had been replaced, and the Carter Grand logo glowed again across the stage as if the room had never shown its teeth. Guests returned to their seats with programs in their hands and questions behind their smiles. Marcus walked in through the side entrance with Noah beside him. Not in front, not hidden, just close enough that the boy's hand could hold the edge of his father's old coat. Evelyn walked a few steps behind them in the stained server's jacket, the crooked badge back on her chest, her bandaged hand resting over it like she was keeping something inside from moving too soon. Richard Holloway was already at the podium. He had changed his tie. That was the first thing Marcus noticed. The old one must have been close enough to the wine, the corridor, the mess, the truth. The new one was silver, smooth, perfect under the stage lights. Richard smiled at the donors, at the board members, at the cameras, and then at Marcus with the sad patience of a man about to forgive someone publicly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "before we continue with the Children's Recovery Fund Pledge Report, I want to address a small disruption from earlier this evening." A soft discomfort moved through the room. Chairs shifted. A woman lowered her champagne glass without drinking. Marcus felt Noah's fingers tighten against his coat. He looked down once, just enough to remind his son he was still there. Richard placed both hands on the podium. A vendor entered a restricted service area, interfered with our banquet team, and unfortunately created confusion around an already difficult accident. He paused, letting the word vendor settle where name should have been. But Carter Grand believes in compassion. We do not punish people for emotional reactions, especially when family is present. The room softened toward him. Marcus could feel it. Richard was good at this. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He wrapped the knife in velvet and called it procedure. A staff member appeared beside Marcus with a leather folder. "Mr. Reed," Richard said from the stage, "we are prepared to restore your vendor eligibility tonight and personally review your son's scholarship file. If you will simply sign a factual incident statement so our guests can move forward." The folder opened. Inside lay the bien ban. Marcus had already been warned about in his bones. It said he had startled the server. It said he had crossed into the service lane without cause. It said no donor contact contributed to the tray accident. At the bottom, beside the signature line, was a case number printed in small type. CRF 47A. Marcus recognized it from the charity record. The same code that had made children disappear on paper. Richard watched his eyes find it. For one breath the mask held. Then Richard smiled wider. "It is only paperwork." Marcus looked at the pen, then at Noah, then at Evelyn, standing at the edge of the stage shadow, still pretending to be someone with no authority to stop this. Her eyes did not beg him to sign or refuse. They watched, measured, waited to see what truth cost when no applause was promised. Noah leaned close, his voice barely more than air. "Dad, is that the paper that fixes your job?" Marcus answered without looking away from the folder. "It fixes the wrong thing." The staff member shifted, uncomfortable. Richard heard just enough. "Mr. Reed, I understand pride can make a man resistant to help." That line landed carefully. Several donors nodded, relieved to have a familiar story. Poor father, proud father, difficult father. Richard continued. "But let's not turn a misunderstanding into a spectacle. Your son deserves opportunity. You deserve dignity. Let us handle this with grace." Marcus closed the folder, but did not hand it back. He placed it on the nearest cocktail table under the white beam of a small lamp. "Then let's handle it with the truth." The room cooled. The air conditioning seemed suddenly loud. Richard's smile thinned. "Truth is exactly why documentation matters." "Good," Marcus said. He reached into his jacket and removed the folded invoice first, smoothing it with his uninjured hand. Holloway Events Consulting Donor Experience Package. He did not waive it. He did not accuse. He laid it beside the statement. This fell near the service elevator. A murmur began. Richard gave a soft laugh. Our event vendors submit invoices. That is not suspicious. Maybe not. Marcus took out the thermal strip next. 7:42 p.m. User RH access granted. This printed from the control room log after the screen went down. Richard looked at it, then at the guests. His voice remained calm, but one hand slid from the podium to the water glass. A partial malfunctioning printout. The system has been unstable all week. Our technician was overwhelmed. Mr. Reed involved himself in a technical matter he was not qualified to understand. The young technician near the side wall lowered his head, shame rising in his face. Marcus turned slightly toward him. Did you loosen the signal cable? The technician's mouth opened. Richard cut in gently. Please do not pressure staff in public. Evelyn's bandaged hand slowly lifted from her badge. She still said nothing. Marcus looked back at Richard. I'm not pressuring him. I'm giving him back the question you took from him. The room quieted again, not fully, but enough for the technician to whisper, No, sir, I didn't touch it. Richard inhaled through his nose. First retention spike broke across the room like a hairline crack. For a moment, his explanation had almost worked. A bad printout, a stressed technician, a confused vendor. Then the technician's answer stayed in the air, small but alive. Richard recovered quickly. And I appreciate that, Daniel. But fear affects memory. Marcus glanced at him. His name tag says Mateo. This time the silence was sharper. The technician looked up. Richard's fingers tightened around the glass. It was a tiny mistake, but in a room built on names, status, and badges it mattered. Evelyn's eyes shifted to Marcus with something that looked almost like respect, then returned to Richard. Marcus placed the third item on the table. Noah's school receipt, worn at the fold, stamped clearly, dated months before the rejection. He did not push it toward the donors. He turned it toward the board. My son's file was marked missing guardian verification. It wasn't missing. Noah stood behind him, one hand still on the coat, cheeks tight with the effort not to cry. He did one thing only. He pointed to the stamp and said, That's the day we waited after school. A simple child's memory. Safe, small, devastating. The board chair leaned forward for the first time. Richard left the podium and stepped down one stair. This is heartbreaking, Mr. Reed, truly, but scholarship paperwork is complex. Bringing a child into an administrative misunderstanding is not fair to him. Marcus's voice stayed low. I didn't bring him into it. Your system did. Evelyn moved then, only one step, but the stage light touched the cracked badge on her chest. Richard saw it and his attention snapped to her. Evelyn, he said, too quickly. Return to staff position. The old command dressed as policy. But his voice had changed. Everyone close enough could hear it. Marcus looked at the folder again. The fake statement, the invoice, the service log, the school receipt, all lying under the lamp like pieces of a door not yet opened. I'm not here to punish anyone, he said. I'm here because if I sign that lie, the next father walks into a school office with all his papers and still gets told his child disappeared. The woman in the black suit from earlier entered through the side aisle, carrying a small encrypted drive and a tablet sealed in a clear evidence pouch. Evelyn saw her and took one slow breath. Richard saw her too, and for the first time that night he forgot to smile. The board chair stood. Ms. Carter, the woman in black said quietly, but the microphone caught enough of it to make the first row turn. Evelyn reached for the crooked badge on her chest. Her thumb pressed the cracked corner until the hidden card clicked once inside the plastic, and above the stage, the main screen went black, waiting for the original file to load. The main screen went black, then came alive with the frozen image of the ballroom from earlier that night. No music. No logo. Just the camera angle Richard had ordered turned off, restored from the original archive. The first frame showed Evelyn in her stained server's jacket carrying the silver tray, Marcus near the service line, Noah by the door with his father's coat, and the velvet-jacketed donor stepping backward with his elbow already raised. No one breathed loudly. Then the footage moved. The donor struck Evelyn's side. The tray tilted. Marcus lunged forward and caught it with one bleeding hand before. Half the glasses hit the marble. Richard's voice, pulled from the room audio, filled the speakers. Turn that angle off until press clears the floor. The first row stopped moving. A woman with diamond earrings lowered her hand slowly from her mouth. The donor in the velvet jacket stared at the screen as if his own reflection had betrayed him. Richard stood beside the stage stairs, one hand still near the folder he had tried to make Marcus sign. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The footage did not stop. It shifted to the service corridor timestamped 7:42 p.m. A man from Richard's staff entered the control room, badge angled away from the camera. The access log appeared beside the video, matched line for line with the thermal strip Marcus had placed under the lamp. User RH access granted. The screen showed the same hand loosening the signal cable just enough to fail later. Then the file moved again. A side angle of Richard stepping between Marcus and the camera, his lips forming the same words everyone had heard him say about privacy, dignity, procedure. Every word that had sounded professional now sounded rehearsed. Evelyn stood under the light at the edge of the stage, one hand resting on the cracked badge at her chest. She did not raise her voice. She did not perform outrage. She simply reached up, unclipped the badge that read Evelyn, banquet service, and placed it on the podium beneath the microphone. The small plastic rectangle clicked against the wood. In the sudden quiet, that tiny sound seemed louder than the applause had ever been. The woman in the black suit connected the tablet to the screen. A second window opened, showing files recovered from the microSD hidden inside the badge. Audit notes, email chains, donor adjustments, scholarship records, and a copy of the invoice Marcus had found near the service elevator. Holloway Events Consulting, Donor Experience Package, Children's Recovery Fund, Adjustment Fee. The numbers lined up with the charity record from the cold room. The codes lined up with rejected applications. The same CRF 47A code appeared beside Noah Reed's name and dozens of others. Marcus felt Noah's hand slide into his. The boy did not speak. He only held tighter, like the truth on the screen had made the room too large. Then the board chair rose from her seat. Her chair legs scraped once against the polished floor and the sound cut across the ballroom like a gavel. She looked at Evelyn first, not as one looks at a server, but as one looks at the person who can end a meeting with one sentence. "Ms. Carter," she said, her voice steady but shaken, "do you authorize this presentation to continue?" The whisper began at the left side of the room, traveled through the donor tables, and died before it reached the stage. "She's the CEO?" Evelyn removed the stained apron. Under it, clipped discreetly to the waistband of her black skirt, was the executive keycard Marcus had seen at the elevator. She lifted it just enough for the front row and the cameras to see. "I do," she said. "My name is Evelyn Carter. I am the CEO of Carter Hospitality. And tonight, I wore this uniform because reports, summaries, and polished meetings were not showing me what was happening to the people this company was supposed to protect." The ballroom froze, not quiet like polite people listening, silent like a room suddenly realizing the floor beneath it had moved. A fork slipped from someone's hand and struck a plate. One phone buzzed on a linen-covered table, then stopped. The projector fan hummed above them. Richard's silver pen rolled from the folder, hit the stage step, and clicked twice before lying still. Evelyn turned toward the security director. "Lock the archive. Preserve all footage from tonight. Suspend deletion permissions for event access accounts." Then to the board chair, "Freeze all Children's Recovery Fund disbursements pending independent audit. Notify legal. Notify the state charity regulator. Richard Holloway and any staff linked to these access logs are suspended from operational authority effective immediately." Richard finally found his voice, dry and thin. "Evelyn, this is a misunderstanding of internal vendor classifications." Evelyn looked at the screen where the video replayed his hand covering the camera angle. "Then the audit will classify it correctly." He looked toward the donors, toward the board, toward any face that had once smiled when he entered a room. No one rescued him. The velvet-jacketed donor stared at the table. The guests who had laughed at Marcus now stared at his stained sleeve, his bandaged hand, the old coat Noah clutched, and finally at the man himself. Marcus did not lift his chin higher. He did not smile. He did not look around to see who regretted what. When Evelyn turned to him, the microphone picked up her voice clearly. Mr. Reed did not defend a CEO tonight. He defended a woman he believed had no power in this room. He protected a server when everyone else protected a sponsor, a schedule, or a reputation. The words settled over Marcus heavier than applause. Noah looked up at him, eyes wet but proud, as if something inside him had been repaired without anyone touching it. Marcus squeezed his son's hand once. "Tell them what you saw, Mr. Reed," Evelyn said. Marcus stepped to the microphone, the lights warming the side of his face. The ballroom waited for anger. He gave them truth. "I saw a man bump her. I saw Mr. Holloway turn off the camera. I saw a young technician blamed for a wire he didn't pull. I saw paperwork used like a door in a child's face." He paused, looking once at Noah, then back at the room. "That's all. The truth doesn't need me to dress it up." No one clapped at first. The silence was too deep, too full of things people could no longer pretend not to know. Then the board chair closed the fake incident statement folder and pushed it away from Marcus as if it were contaminated. "Mr. Reed will not sign this," she said, "and this board will not accept it." Richard looked at the folder, then at the screen, then at Evelyn's badge lying under the microphone. For the first time that night, he seemed smaller than the room he had controlled. Security did not grab him. No one needed spectacle. 2 legal staff simply stepped beside him, collected his access card, and asked him to come with them. As they led him away, Evelyn looked at Noah, not past him, not through him, but at him. "Noah," she said gently, "your father should never have had to choose between your future and the truth." Noah swallowed and whispered, "He didn't." Evelyn's face changed at that, and the wound in the room changed with it. The evidence had opened the door. Justice had stepped through. But Marcus could feel another question waiting beyond the applause that finally began to rise. When a room that once tried to throw you out suddenly offers you honor, what do you choose to carry home? The applause did not explode. It rose carefully, like people were afraid of what their hands had helped ignore. Then it faded into a different kind of silence. Not the frozen silence from the reveal, not the guilty silence after the footage, but the quiet that comes when a room finally understands the size of what was almost buried. Richard Holloway was escorted through the side doors by legal staff, not dragged, not shouted at, just separated from the power he had used too easily. His access card was placed in a clear evidence pouch. His phone was logged. His office was sealed before anyone from his team could enter it. The velvet-jacketed donor tried to leave through the front, but the board chair stopped him with one sentence about witness statements and preservation of footage. Around the ballroom, servers who had spent the night lowering their eyes began looking up. The young technician, Matteo, stood near the wall with his headset still around his neck, staring at the screen where the 742 access line had once made him look careless. Evelyn Carter stepped down from the stage. No apron now, no disguise except the stain of red wine still dried across her white shirt. She did not go to the donors first. She went to Noah. Marcus felt his son's hand tighten, but the boy did not hide. Evelyn lowered herself slightly, not to make a performance of kindness, but so her eyes met his without asking him to look up at power. "Noah," she said, and her voice was softer than it had been at the microphone. "I am sorry, not because your father embarrassed anyone tonight, because our system embarrassed you before you ever walked into this room." Noah glanced at Marcus first, asking permission without words. Marcus gave the smallest nod. "We turned in the papers," Noah said. "I know," Evelyn answered. "And tomorrow morning, an independent team is going to reopen your file and every file marked with that same code. Not as a favor, as a correction." The word correction seemed to land deeper than scholarship. Marcus saw it in his son's shoulders. The boy did not suddenly become happy. Wounds do not obey announcements. But something unclenched. The school receipt, the thin piece of paper Marcus had kept for months because he could not afford to lose proof, lay on the cocktail table beside the fake incident statement. A board member picked it up with both hands, as if the paper had become heavier now that it had a child's face attached to it. Evelyn turned to Marcus. "Mr. Reed, your contract cancellation has already been reversed." Marcus looked toward the folder, then back at her. "That was never the biggest thing." "I know." She swallowed once. "That is why I am not asking you to take a check and disappear from the story." Around them, the ballroom workers began giving written statements. Security copied badge logs. A woman from legal took photographs of the invoice, the thermal strip, the charity record, the school receipt, and the cracked badge. Each object was placed into a separate sleeve. The badge went last. Evelyn held it for a moment before handing it over. Evelyn, banquet service. The plastic was still cracked where it had hit the floor. A small brown mark from Marcus's blood remained near the corner. Impossible to clean without erasing what the night had cost. "That badge should have made me invisible," Evelyn said. "Instead it showed me who was willing to see." Marcus did not know what to do with praise that honest. He looked away, toward the doors where he had first been told to leave. "A lot of people saw," he said. "They just chose what was easier." Evelyn nodded. "Then the repair has to be harder than the damage." Before midnight, the board voted in emergency session in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the ballroom. Marcus did not sit at the head of the table. He sat near the end with Noah beside him, his old coat folded across his lap, the bloodstain tucked inside. Evelyn made the decisions plain. Richard and the staff tied to the access. Logs were suspended pending investigation. The Children's Recovery Fund accounts were frozen. An outside audit firm would review 18 months of rejected applications. A staff protection policy would be enacted before the next event, including independent camera retention, anonymous reporting, and a rule that no manager could delete or restrict footage without dual authorization. Then Evelyn looked at Marcus. "We need a community oversight seat held by someone who understands what paperwork feels like when it hits a kitchen table." Marcus let the words sit. He thought of rent. He thought of the driver app. He thought of Noah in the school office, pretending not to listen. He thought of Evelyn on her knees beside broken glass, wearing power so quietly that cruelty mistook her silence for weakness. "I'm not a boardroom man," he said. "No," Evelyn replied. "That is why the boardroom needs you." It would have been easy to accept because it sounded like rescue. Marcus did not want rescue. He wanted responsibility with clean edges. "If I do this," he said, "it's not for a title, and it's not just for Noah." Evelyn's face softened. "That is exactly why I am asking." Noah leaned against his father's arm, tired now, the night finally catching up with him. "Dad," he whispered, "does this mean you still have work tomorrow?" Marcus looked at him and smiled a little. "It means I have more work than I did this morning." Noah considered that, then nodded like it made sense. Much later, when the ballroom had emptied and the chandeliers were dimmed to half-light, Marcus and Noah walked back through the same service door they had been pushed toward earlier. No one blocked them. No one called him vendor like it meant disposable. Mateo lifted 2 fingers in a shy wave. A server Marcus had never met said, "Thank you, sir," and Marcus answered, "You deserved better before I got here." Near the entrance, Evelyn stood beside a temporary display case where the evidence team had photographed the badge before sealing the micro-SD. She had asked for a replica to remain there until the audit ended. Beneath it, on a small white card, someone had typed the words, "Kindness saw the truth before power did." Marcus read it once, then looked down at Noah. The boy was running his thumb along the sleeve of his mother's old coat, the one stained by Marcus's blood and folded by his careful hands. Earlier, that coat had made the room uncomfortable. Now it looked like what it had always been. Something kept, something loved, something that had covered a child while his father stepped toward danger without making a speech. Evelyn walked with them to the door. For a moment, none of them spoke. There was no promise of romance, no sudden future pretending pain had already healed. There was only respect, new and quiet, standing between two people who had seen each other under pressure. "Good night, Mr. Reed," Evelyn said. "Good night, Miss Carter." Noah looked up. "Good night, Miss Evelyn." That was the first time all night Evelyn smiled without holding something back. Outside, the city air was cool, and the valet lights shimmered in the wet pavement. Marcus opened the car door for Noah, then paused before getting in. Behind the glass, the grand ballroom was nearly empty, but a few staff members stood still near the stage, looking at the place where the screen had told the truth. No one clapped now. No one whispered. They simply understood. Marcus adjusted the old watch on his wrist, the one his wife had once teased him for checking even when he had nowhere important to be, and took his son's hand. Dignity had not shouted that night. It had bled quietly onto an old coat, picked up a broken badge, and waited until the truth was strong enough to stand.